Moscow, the year 1952. For the majority of Soviet citizens, this was a time of great construction sites, of feats of labor valor, and of belief in a bright future. But behind the facade of the Stalinist empire, in the shadow of the Kremlin towers, another reality was hiding. A reality that was not written about in the newspapers, a reality woven from fear, carnal lust, and broken destinies. Today we will tell you a story that was kept for decades under the strictly secret stamp, the history of the dirtiest case in the history of the USSR. It all began not with an arrest, not with an interrogation. It all began with an invitation that was impossible to refuse. She was 19 years old. Let's call her Kira. She was not a simple student. She was the hope of the year, the future star of Soviet cinema. An unearthly beauty, a talent noticed even by the strictest professors at VGIK. She lived in a tiny room in the dormitory, ate at the student canteen, and dreamed of a big role that would make her famous. One day after classes, a man approached her, a faded figure in a well-tailored grey suit, a man who had no name, only a rank, the assistant to a very big man. "Kira Alexandrovna." His voice was quiet, almost insinuating, but in it one could feel a will of steel. "Someone is interested in you. Your talent has not gone unnoticed. There are people ready to help you in your ascent. This evening, a small dinner will take place in a very narrow, very important circle. They will pick you up at 8 o'clock. It was not a question. It was a statement. Kira felt a cold shiver run down her spine. Everyone in their little bohemian world knew what such invitations meant. This was whispered about in the makeup booths, in the smoking areas. It was a chance. The chance to receive everything, the leading role, an apartment in the center of Moscow, glory. But this chance had a price that was not usually spoken about aloud. That evening, she stood in front of the mirror in her shabby little room. She wore her only decent dress. She looked at her reflection, a young, frightened girl with huge eyes full of hope, and she made a choice. A choice between honor and career, between dream and reality. At 8 o'clock, a black Zim pulled up at the dormitory, the personal car of a Politburo member. The whole street, all the neighbors were glued to the windows. It was a triumph, and it was a shame. They took her to one of the villas in the Moscow suburbs, hidden behind a high, opaque fence. There, in luxurious interiors, a very narrow circle awaited. A few grey-haired men invested with power, whose faces she had seen only in portraits in the Pravda newspaper, and a few girls just like her, young, beautiful, frightened. Actresses, ballerinas, students, the flower of the nation. The sacrificial lamb on the altar of power, the host of the evening, let's call him the comrade master, was the height of politeness. He spoke of high art, of the future of Soviet cinema. He poured champagne and paid compliments. But behind this mask of hospitality hid the cold, evaluating gaze of a predator. He did not look at them as people. He looked at them as thoroughbred horses in his stable. And Kira understood that this is not just a dinner, it is a viewing, it is an auction where, as lots, their youth, their beauty, their future are put up. And the payment for this lot is not money. The payment is their bodies, their souls. Later, when the evening was in full swing, the comrade master approached her. He took her by the arm, and his touch was like the touch of red-hot iron. "Let's go, child," he whispered, and he smelled of expensive tobacco and power. "I want to talk to you about your future role in private." He led her down the corridor into one of the bedrooms, and Kira walked as if to the scaffold, because she knew that refusal was not accepted. Refusal here, in this house, meant the end of her career, the end of the dream, and perhaps even the end of her life. She had made her choice back there, in the dormitory, in front of the mirror, and now she had to pay the bill this night and for many nights after that. She did not know then that that evening was only the beginning of a long fall of 5 years into the abyss from which almost no one ever returned. She was becoming part of the dirtiest and most terrible secret of the Kremlin. What happened that night in the bedroom of the government villa was not rape in its usual criminal sense. There were no screams, no struggle, no resistance. It was something much worse. It was a silent, methodical, indifferent use of a human body, which, by the right of the strongest, was considered property. The comrade master was not brutal. He was worse. He was indifferent. For him, this was not an act of passion, but a routine procedure, like signing another state document. He took what was his, and Kira lay on the silk sheets, looked at the stucco-decorated ceiling, and felt her soul detach from her body and fly somewhere far away to her tiny room in the dormitory, to her books, to her dreams. In the morning, they took her back. When she entered her room, the first thing she did was approach the mirror. From the mirror, the same girl looked back, but the eyes were different. There was no longer light in them. There was emptiness in them, emptiness and knowledge. A terrible, adult knowledge about how this world is actually organized. And one day later, miracles began in her life. She, a second-year student, was confirmed for the main role in a new historical film, which was to be directed by the country's most famous director, a role that all the honored artists dreamed of. The dean of the faculty, who previously looked down on her, now smiled fawningly at her upon meeting. They allocated her a separate room in the dormitory. At the student canteen, the cook gave her the best piece of meat. The world changed. The world bowed before her. But Kira knew the price of these miracles. The price was herself, her body, her time, her soul. She became part of a system, invisible, unofficial, but no less real because of that. 2 or 3 times a week, the Black Zim would come for her and take her sometimes to the villa, sometimes to a luxurious apartment in the center of Moscow, sometimes to a special room in the hotel Moskva. Sometimes only he, the comrade master, was there. Other times, there were his friends, the same grey-haired gods invested with power. They were not always orgies in the sense shown in movies. Often they were just dinners. They ate, drank expensive cognac, held their discussions about politics, about state affairs, about the fate of the world. And the girls, Kira, ballerinas from the Bolshoi, students from Gitis, just had to sit nearby. Beautiful, silent, like porcelain figurines. They were part of the decor, a status symbol, proof that these men could afford everything, any luxury, any woman. But sometimes, when alcohol untied their hands and tongues, something else began. They forced the girls to dance, to sing, to tell jokes. They could, in passing, pinch them on the thigh, spank them. They played with them like a cat with a mouse, and then, choosing their victim for the evening, they took her to the bedroom. Kira learned to survive in this world. She learned to disconnect her emotions. She learned to smile when she felt like crying. She learned to drink without getting drunk. She became the ideal actress, playing her most terrible role, the role of an expensive elite woman who pretends to be the muse and inspiration of great men. She saw how others broke. One of the ballerinas, unable to bear it anymore, slit her wrists. They sent her quietly, without noise, to a psychiatric hospital. Another student tried to complain. She disappeared. She simply stopped coming to classes. No one ever saw her again. Kira understood the main rule of this game: be silent and obey, and then you will receive everything: glory, money, roles. But if you try to revolt, the system will devour you without choking. She became famous. The film with her participation had a deafening success. Her portraits were printed in magazines. People recognized her on the streets, asked for autographs. She became the symbol of Soviet beauty, of Soviet talent. Millions of people looked at her shining face on the screen and did not suspect that behind that smile hid an abyss of despair and self-loathing. She lived in 2 worlds. By day, the world of glory, adoration, red carpets. By night, the world of sticky, humiliating slavery. And she did not know which of these worlds was more frightening. The world of lies, in which she was a queen, or the world of truth, in which she was just an object, a toy in the hands of old and depraved spiders. One day, she fell in love with a young cameraman from her film crew. He was clean, bright, talented. He looked at her not as a star but as a woman. He recited poems to her, gave her wildflowers. Next to him, for the first time in a long time, she felt alive. She allowed herself for a moment to believe that salvation was possible. They met in secret, walked through the night parks, kissed in the back rows at the cinema. This was her small and fragile world, her refuge. But in that other world, Nothing could be hidden from the all-seeing eye of the comrade master. One day, after another dinner, he told her, lazily blowing cigar smoke, "They say you have an admirer, a cameraman. It's not good, child. You are an unusual woman. You belong to art, and art, like power, does not tolerate rivals. Think about it." It was not a threat. It was a sentence. And Kira knew that this sentence would be executed. A few days later, her lover, the cameraman Andrei, was summoned to the film studio director's office. He was informed that the party and the government greatly appreciated his talent and were sending him on a long-term creative assignment to the Far East. To film a documentary about the life of whalers. It was an honorary exile, a one-way ticket. Andrei understood everything. In the evening, he met with Kira. "They know," he said, and in his eyes was pain and helplessness. "Kira, what is happening? Who are these people? What do they want from you?" She couldn't tell him the truth. She couldn't drag him into her filth. "Nothing, Andrei, nothing," she lied, swallowing her tears. "It's just work. You have to go. It's a big chance for you. We will write to each other. I will wait for you." He looked at her, and in his gaze was love and despair. He didn't believe her, but he could do nothing. He was a small man against an all-powerful and ruthless machine. He left, and Kira remained. She remained in her gilded cage. Her little world, her refuge was destroyed, and she understood that there was no way out. She belonged to them completely. Not only her body, but also her life, her destiny, the destinies of those she dared to love. After Andrei's departure, she fell into depression. She acted poorly, ruined shoots. She started drinking, not at those dinners of theirs, but alone, in the luxurious apartment that had been assigned to her. She drank to forget, to cover up at least for a few hours the pain and disgust that burned her inside. The comrade master noticed this. He didn't scold her. He did it differently. He summoned her to him. "You are not informed, child," he said with his quiet, insinuating voice. "You need to rest, to get treated. I have a friend, a professor, a luminary in psychiatry. He has a small, very comfortable clinic in the Moscow suburbs for our people. There is wonderful nature there, good care. You will spend about 2 months there. You will recover." Kira understood that this is not a proposal. It is an order. They were sending her to prison, to an elite velvet prison for broken toys. She knew that people didn't always return from such clinics, or they returned, but different. With empty eyes and a submissive smile, stuffed with drugs that kill not the disease, but the will. They placed her in a separate room with bars on the windows. The bars were masked under an elegant pattern, but they were bars. Her attending physician became the professor himself, a grey-haired, intelligent man in a pristine white coat and with the eyes of a coroner. He didn't treat her. He broke her completely. They injected her with preparations that made her fall into apathy, into indifference towards everything. Discussions were held with her. "You must understand, Kira Alexandrovna," the professor would say with his quiet, lulling voice. "You are special, you are the Republic's asset. Your health, your spiritual balance is a matter of state importance. You do not belong to yourself. You belong to the people, to the party, and you must serve them with everything you can. With your talent, with your beauty, with your body. This is your duty, your high mission. And all these anxieties of yours, this love, it is selfishness. It is petty bourgeois. This must be eradicated, thrown out like useless trash." It was a devilish, refined psychotherapy. They didn't just want to submit her, they wanted her to believe that her slavery was actually a high honor. To accept her role not as humiliation, but as service. To become not just a submissive slave, but an ideological one. And she almost broke under the action of the drugs and these poisonous daily discussions. Her will was melting like snow in the sun. She was almost ready to believe that they were right, that her place was there, at those night orgies, that this was her destiny. Salvation came from where she did not expect it. One of the nurses in that clinic, a quiet, intimidated woman, recognized her. She was a fan of hers, she had seen all her movies, and she saw what they were turning her idol into. One night, risking everything, she slipped into her room. "Run, Kira Alexandrovna, run," she whispered, slipping the key to the door into her hand. "They will kill you, if not the body, then the soul. Run, I will leave the back door open. You have 1 hour. This simple, sincere humanity, this act of self-sacrifice pulled Kira out of her stupor. She understood that all was not yet lost, that real people still existed. She ran as if in a delirium, through the night forest. She didn't know where. She simply ran from her gilded cage. In the morning, she came out at a railway station, dirty, ragged, with mad eyes. She got on the first passenger train. She knew they would look for her, that the full power of the state machine would be thrown into searching for her. She was a toy that knew too much. They couldn't just let her go. She had to disappear, to hide at the bottom, to die to this world. She got off the train in a small and insignificant town, 1,000 kilometers from Moscow. She sold the only gold ring she had left at the market. With this money, she rented a room in an old wooden house. She got a job as a dishwasher at the local canteen. The famous movie star, the idol of millions, was now washing dirty plates in a god-forsaken tavern. This was her bottom, and this was her salvation. Here no one knew her. Here she was a nobody, simply a woman without a past. She lived in permanent fear. Every stranger seemed to her an agent of state security. Every black car passing on the street made her heart stop. But she was free. For the first time in many years, she was truly free. Free in her poverty, in her fear, in her loneliness. Time passed. 1 year passed, then another. Kira lived in her small grey world. Work at the canteen, the shabby room, lonely evenings. She learned to be invisible. She cut her gorgeous hair short, stopped wearing makeup, wore old and baggy clothes. No one would have recognized the bright movie star in this tired and extinguished woman. The fear gradually receded, being replaced by a dull, nagging sadness. She missed it. She missed her real life, the theater, the filming, the smell of the backstage. The talent that was in her demanded to come out. Sometimes, remaining alone, she read monologues from her favorite plays aloud. And in those minutes, she became again the one she was born to be, a great actress. She didn't know what was happening there, in the big world. In her town, the central newspapers arrived late. But one day she saw a familiar face in a black frame at the newsstand. Stalin had died. The era was ending. Kira felt this with her whole being. The world that seemed unshakable, like granite, began to crack at the seams. She didn't know what this meant for her, hope or a new danger. And a few months later, the incredible happened. He died too, the comrade master, her tormentor, her creator, her curse. A heart attack at another villa. During another creative evening, the system devoured its own dragon. But even after his death, Kira was afraid. She knew that the system remained, that there were others, that there were those who remembered. She continued to hide. A few more years passed. The thaw began. The era of revelations, of rehabilitations. The air filled with hope. And behold, one day a knock was heard at the door of her room. Kira froze. Had they found her? On the threshold stood a man, a stranger in civilian clothes, but not with that cold, all-seeing gaze. His eyes were tired, human. "Kira Alexandrovna?" he asked. She nodded silently. "My name is Ivan Petrovich. I am from the State Security Committee." Kira felt the ground slip from under her feet. The end. "Do not be afraid," he said, as if reading her thoughts. "I am not here for that. Times are changing. We are conducting an investigation in the case of the so-called Demidov group. We are looking for witnesses. We need your help. We want you to testify." Kira looked at him and could not believe her ears. They wanted her to testify against them, against those who just yesterday seemed all-powerful. "Why?" she whispered. "They no longer exist." "They no longer exist," he nodded. "But the system they created remains. It is filth. It is a cancerous tumor. It must be cleaned so that this never happens again. We need you. We need those who saw everything from the inside, who were there. We know it is dangerous. We know it is scary. Many of those who remained are still in their positions. But if we don't do this now, we will never be able to consider ourselves clean." It was a choice, again a choice, the most terrible of her life. She could refuse. say that she didn't remember anything, that she knew nothing, and continue to live in her grey but safe burrow. Or she could accept and return to that hell from which she had fled with such difficulty. To return, to fight her ghosts. It was incredibly risky. She knew that these people had long hands, that they could take revenge, they could kill her, her loved ones, if they appeared. But she also knew something else, that if she refused now, she would betray not only the memory of those girls who did not survive, she would betray herself, that 19-year-old girl with the dream of the big stage. She would remain forever a dishwasher in a provincial canteen. I agree, she said firmly. They brought her to Moscow. They housed her secretly in a safe house. The interrogations lasted for weeks. She told everything in the smallest details, named names, dates, places. She brought out all that filth that she had carried in her all these years. The investigator, that Ivan Petrovich, took notes without raising his head. Sometimes she saw his jaws clench. This was not a simple investigation. It was a purge, a new purge, directed against the old guard. Khrushchev, having come to power, was using this dirty case to eliminate his political competitors, Beria's people, and the people of the old Stalinist mold. Kira was a pawn in their big political game. She understood this, but she didn't care. She had her own goal. She wanted justice. She wanted the world to know the truth. Her testimonies, as well as the testimonies of a few other girls who decided to speak, formed the basis of the loudest and most closed judicial process of that era. Not only those who organized these orgies were judged, but also those who participated in them. Those writers, composers, people's artists, those whom the country considered its conscience and pride. The trial was closed. The details of the case were classified for decades, but the sentences were harsh. Some were shot, others were sent to camps for many years, others were simply stripped of all titles and privileges and erased from history. The system was devouring its children. After the trial, Kira was proposed to return to cinema, to the theatre. New roles, glory, honours were promised to her. Honours were, "You are a heroine, Kira Alexandrovna," Ivan Petrovich told her. "You helped us clean the country. You deserve this." Kira looked at him, and for the first time in a long time smiled. "No, thank you, comrade investigator," she said. "I have already played my main role. I don't play these games anymore." She did not return to Moscow. The capital, with its brilliance and backstage intrigues, no longer attracted her. She returned to her quiet and godforsaken town, which had become for her not a prison, but a refuge. But she returned different, not an intimidated dishwasher, but a woman who looked fear in the eye and won. With the money she was paid, as compensation for illegal repressions, that's how they vaguely formulated her story in official documents, she bought herself a small house with a garden. She resigned from the canteen and got a job at the local House of Culture. She organized a theater circle for children there. That became her life's work. She taught children. She taught them not only acting skills, she taught them what had been taken from her, the feeling of their own dignity. She taught them that talent is not a commodity that can be sold, that art is not a way to get a role or an apartment, but a way to make the world better, cleaner. She was a strict but fair teacher. The children adored her. For them, she was a mysterious woman, a little strange but incredibly talented and wise. None of them, of course, knew that the former star of Soviet cinema, who had gone through all the circles of the Kremlin hell, was teaching them. She never married. She couldn't. Her past and her experience created an impassable barrier between her and other men. She couldn't trust. She couldn't afford to become vulnerable again. Her only love, her family, became her students. Sometimes Ivan Petrovich, that investigator, came to her. He had become her only friend, the only person who knew her true story. They sat in her garden, drank tea, and he told her news from the big world. He told her how the country was gradually changing, how those who once seemed all-powerful were passing into oblivion. "We won, Kira," he said one day. "Did we win?" She smiled bitterly. "But what did we defeat, Vanya? Some dragons were replaced by others. The system remained. It just changed its mask." "Maybe you're right," he sighed. "But at least we tried. We lit a candle in the dark, and that is not a small thing." Years passed. Kira grew old. She became a local legend. our seagull, as they called her in town, a woman with a tragic destiny and a great talent. Her theatre circle became known throughout the region. Her students entered the best theatre faculties in the country. She had given them a ticket to life, to that world she herself had renounced. One day, already at the end of the 80s, in the times of glasnost and perestroika, a young journalist from a central newspaper came to her. He had found out her story or part of it from somewhere. "Kira Alexandrovna," he said, and his eyes burned with young and naive enthusiasm. "Your story must be told. The country must know its heroes and executioners. You must give an interview. It will be a bomb." Kira looked at him for a long time, at this boy who thought that the truth is so simple that you can just take and tell, and everything will change. "No, my dear," she said softly. "There will be no bomb. It will be just another dirty story that they will discuss in kitchens. Some will pity me, others will judge me. They will say that I was to blame myself, that I wanted glory. A third group won't even believe it, and those who are still alive, those who were there, will remain silent. And their children, who now occupy high posts, will do everything so that this story never becomes public." "But why?" The journalist would not settle down. "People need to know." "People don't want to know." Kira shook her head. "They want to believe in fairy tales about great leaders, about people's artists, about pure art. The truth is too ugly. It destroys their world, and they don't want that. Leave the dead in peace, and the living as well." She showed him out. She didn't want her story to become a sensation. She didn't want her name to be dragged through the pages of newspapers again. She had already finished her war, and she had won it. Not by taking revenge, but by being able to survive. And not just to survive, but to keep the human in her and to help others become human. She died peacefully in her little house, surrounded by books and photographs of her students. The whole town came to her funeral, and none of these people ever found out what a terrible secret she took with her to the grave. The secret of the dirtiest case in the history of the USSR. A case that remained undiscovered to the end, buried in secret archives. A case that was not just a story about debauchery and violence, but a story about the very nature of power. Power that corrupts, and absolute power that corrupts, absolutely. Decades passed. The Soviet Union, that empire that birthed her and raised her, and then almost destroyed Kira, collapsed, leaving behind the shards of great myths and millions of untold tragedies. The small town where Kira lived the second half of her life was slowly decaying, just like the memory of its seagull. Her students scattered. Some forgot their old mentor, others remembered her with a warm and bright sadness. One of them was Victor, that talented boy whom she once considered her main success. He not only entered the theatre in Moscow, he became a known, fashionable director. His plays gathered full halls. Critics wrote about him as a new voice of the generation. He was tough, uncompromising. He staged plays about the truth, about broken destinies, about the little man in the grinder of history. He had learned this from her, from Kira Alexandrovna. She had put into him her pain, her belief that art must be honest. He often remembered her mystery, her sad eyes, her aristocratic bearing, which looked so strange in the shabby house of culture of a provincial town. He remembered her official biography, widow, survivor of the blockade. But he had always felt that behind this facade hid a terrible, deep secret. One day, working on a new play about the 50s, he sat for hours in archives, leafing through old magazines and photographs. And lo and behold, in one of the issues of the magazine Soviet Screen, from the year 1952, he saw a photograph. The photograph of a young actress, incredibly beautiful, with doe eyes, full of light and hope. Her name was Kira Volkova, and she looked like 2 drops of water like his teacher, Kira Alexandrovna Orlova. Victor felt as if he had been struck by an electric current. He began to dig. He ransacked the old theatre archives, spoke with veterans of film studios. The history of Kira Volkova was short and bright, like lightning. A single, triumphant film and complete oblivion. She had simply disappeared, evaporated. The official version left the profession for health reasons. But backstage, they whispered about something else, about her connection with someone among the all-powerful gods, about her sudden nervous breakdown, about her mysterious disappearance. Victor understood that he had stumbled upon the secret of his life. He had to find out the truth, not for the sake of sensation, but for her sake, for the sake of the memory of the woman who made him what he became. His searches reached a dead end. Everyone who could know something had either died or was silent as fish, but in the old things that remained after Kira's death, and which he had once taken as a keepsake, he found an old diary. And in it, among phone numbers of organizations that had long ceased to exist, was a name, Ivan Petrovich Sokolov. And next to it, a note, "The man I trust." Victor began to look for this man. It took months, connections, requests, and he found him. Ivan Petrovich Sokolov, a KGB major general in reserve, was living out his last days at a villa in the Moscow suburbs. He was very old, sick, and communicated with no one. Victor came to him without warning. The old man met him coldly. "I am in connection with Kira Alexandrovna Orlova," said Victor. "More precisely, Kira Volkova." At the sound of this name, the old man flinched. His faded eyes looked at Victor with suspicion. "I am her student," continued Victor. "She was more than a mother to me. I just want to know the truth." Ivan Petrovich was silent for a long time, studying the face of the young director. He saw in him not journalistic curiosity, but a sincere, filial pain. "She didn't want this to be known," he said finally. "She wanted to take her secret with her." "I know," Victor nodded, "but I am not a country, I am not a newspaper, I am her memory. I believe that her memory deserves to be complete, that at least someone knows what she had to go through and who she really was." This argument, it seems, worked. The old Chekist sighed heavily. He approached an old safe, locked with a key, and struggled for a long time with the lock. Finally, he pulled out a thin file, yellowed by time. On the file was the stamp, "To be kept forever." "I investigated this case," he said, placing the file on the table, "and I gave my word that no one would ever see these documents. But you, perhaps you have the right to. She probably would have wanted you to know." He opened the file. Inside were interrogation protocols, photographs, certificates, reports. A dry, emotionless chronicle of hell, the chronicle of the dirtiest case in the history of the USSR. "Read," said Ivan Petrovich. "Just keep in mind, after you read this, your world will never be the same again, and you will understand why she remained silent." Victor took the first sheet in his hand. It was the interrogation protocol of the 19-year-old VJK student, Kira Volkova, and he began to read. Victor read all night. He sat on an old, sunken sofa in the retired general's house, and the pages of the yellowed documents carried him into another, terrible world. A world that he, a child of the thaw and perestroika, did not even suspect existed. It wasn't just a story about sexual slavery. It was a story about the mechanism of power, about how the system breaks, grinds, and destroys a person, turning them into a submissive doll without a will. He read Kira's testimonies, written in her even almost calligraphic handwriting. She did not complain, she did not accuse. She simply described with an icy, protocol-like calm the facts, dates, names, places. "They brought me to the villa, ordered me to undress. Then Comrade N entered the room. He read the testimonies of other girls, those who did not break, who did not disappear, whom the investigators managed to find. The stories were carbon copies. The scheme was one and the same, the invitation that could not be refused. Blackmail, threats, usage, and then payment, roles, titles, apartments, the carrot and the stick. But the most terrible things were not these testimonies. The most terrible were other documents in this file. Medical conclusions, death certificates by suicide, reports on sudden disappearances, dozens of broken, destroyed lives. Girls who were not as strong as Kira, who could not survive, who remained just a line in this terrible classified file. He read and saw not dry lines, but living faces. He imagined these young, talented ballerinas and actresses. He saw their fear, humiliation, despair. And he saw his teacher, his Kira Alexandrovna. He saw how she, at 19 years old, stands before the all-powerful master, how she walks into his bedroom, how she lies on the silk sheets, staring at the ceiling. He understood. He understood everything. He understood the nature of her eternal sadness. He understood why she never married. He understood why she wanted so desperately to teach them, her students, the sense of their own dignity. She was trying to give them what had been taken from her. Towards morning, when he finished reading the last page, he felt aged by 100 years. Ivan Petrovich, who had dozed off in the armchair all this time, woke up. "Well, what do you say, Director?" he asked. "Now you know what you will do with this." "I will stage a play," Victor said firmly. "A play?" The old man grinned. "Do you think you will be allowed to? Even now, if you speak real names, they won't let you. Their descendants, their grandsons, sit in big offices now. They won't allow it. They will simply destroy you, just as they did to her once." "I won't speak names," answered Victor. "Names are not important. The mechanism is important, the system is important. I will make a play not about them. I will make a play about her, about Kira, about her strength, about her pain, about her victory. It won't be an exposé, it will be a requiem, and it will be a monument to her and to all those girls who did not survive." Ivan Petrovich looked at him for a long time, then slowly nodded. "You are probably right," he said. "Only in this way can one tell about this. Not in the language of protocols, but in the language of art. That art which they tried to violate but failed. She probably would have wanted this." Victor returned to Moscow. He cancelled all current projects. He locked himself in his apartment and began to write. He was writing the play of his life. He didn't sleep at night. Before his eyes stood the lines from those terrible documents and the face of his teacher. He wrote a play about a young, talented actress who falls into the grinder of power. He mentioned no real names. All characters were fictional, collective. But those who knew could guess. The essence was not in that. The essence was in the story. In the story of how a fragile girl, passing through all the circles of hell, finds within herself the strength not only to survive, but to keep her soul and to win. To win not through revenge, but through oblivion, through leaving, through preserving herself for another cause, a true one. When the play was ready, he took it to his theatre. The director, reading it, was horrified. "Victor, have you gone mad?" he said. "Do you understand what this is? It's a bomb. They will shut us down. They will fire me. And you. I'm afraid to even imagine what they will do to you." "If you don't stage it, I will leave the theatre," Victor answered calmly. "And I will stage it elsewhere, in a basement, on the street, anywhere. But this show will exist." The theatre director was a cautious man, but he was also a man of art, and understood that he held a masterpiece in his hands, a great and true dramaturgy. After long hesitations, he gave his consent. Rehearsals began. They were the hardest rehearsals of Victor's life. He tormented his actors, demanding from them not acting, but an authentic, inner existence. He told them about that era, about the fear, about the duplicity, but he didn't tell them the main thing. He didn't tell them that this story is not fiction, that the main heroine is a real person, his teacher. This was his secret, his pain. The rehearsals turned into torture, not a creative and joyful one, but an exhausting war. Victor's war with the actors, with the material, with himself. He was ruthless. He demanded from the actors not acting, but a total and agonizing immersion into that era, into that sticky fear that penetrated everywhere. It was hardest for the young actress Anna, who played the role of the main heroine, whom he had named Lika in the play. Anna was talented, smart. She was a star of the new generation, the generation of free, privileged people, and she did not understand her heroine. "Victor, I don't believe her!" she shouted after another failed rehearsal. "She just isn't a doll. Why doesn't she fight? Why does she allow them to do this? She goes into that bedroom like a sheep to the slaughter. Where is her protest? Where is her human dignity?" Victor looked at her, at this beautiful and self-confident girl, and saw the abyss between their worlds. "She has no dignity, Anya," he said coldly. And from his calmness, the actors felt fear. They took it from her. She has no protest, because protest means the execution basement. She has no choice. There is only the illusion of choice, and she knows this. She is not a sheep. She is a human looking into the eyes of her death, and trying to negotiate with it, to postpone it at any cost. But Anna did not give up. She tried to play her Lika as strong, bold, resisting internally, and Victor interrupted her without mercy. "False!" he shouted. "That is all from today. You, the ones of today, are so brave." But then it was different. Then silence was a scream, and submission was a form of survival. Understand this once and for all. The climax came during the rehearsal of the most terrible scene, the scene in the clinic, where the professor psychiatrist fixes the heroine's brains. The actor playing the professor was magnificent. He spoke with his quiet, insinuating voice, and that voice sent shivers down the spine. And Anna? Anna had to listen, simply sit and listen, and break slowly, terrifyingly, irreversibly. And she couldn't. She jumped to her feet, covering her ears with her hands. I can't play this!" she shouted, and there were tears in her voice. "It's monstrous. I don't understand how one can live after such a thing. How can you not go mad? Your Lika is not a living person. She is a function, an illustration. I don't want to play a function." Silence fell in the hall. The entire troupe was looking at Victor. He slowly descended from his director's seat in the hall to the stage. He approached Anna. He was pale, and his hands were trembling. "Okay," he said quietly, so that only she could hear him. "Do you want the truth? Do you want to understand? Come with me." He took her to his office. He locked the door. He took a single photocopy out of the safe. It was that very page from Kira's interrogation protocol, where she described her stay in the clinic. He handed it to Anna. "Read." Anna took the sheet. She began to read. And as she read, her face changed. The flush disappeared. Her lips turned white. She read the dry and impassive lines written by a stranger's hand, but behind them she saw a living, breathing pain. She saw not a fictional Lika, but a real 19-year-old girl, whom they were methodically, scientifically, with a smile on their lips, turning into a vegetable. She finished reading and raised eyes full of horror to Victor. This was for real," she whispered. "Yes," Victor nodded. "This was with her." "With whom? Who is this play about?" "She didn't go mad. She escaped, and she survived. And she lived a long and dignified life. She taught children theater. She taught me. And now, go on stage and play. Play not the humiliation. Play her will to live. That will which turned out to be stronger than their psychotropics, stronger than their KGB, stronger than their entire cursed system." Anna returned to the stage. She was white as chalk. She said nothing to the other actors. She simply sat down on the chair again. "We begin," commanded Victor. And the miracle began. Anna wasn't acting. She was living. She simply sat and listened to the professor's monologue. But in her silence, in her stillness, in the way she stared at a fixed point, was everything. All the abyss of despair and all the abyss of power. That titanic inner work of the soul fighting for itself when the body has already betrayed. At the end of the scene, she was not crying. On her face was only a faint, barely visible smile. The smile of a person who has been to hell and decided to return from there. When the scene ended, there was absolute silence in the hall for several minutes. The actors looked at Anna with superstitious horror. They understood. They didn't know the details, but they understood that they had touched something true, something frightening and great. The play was ready. It was polished, built, suffered through. It resembled a taut nerve. It struck the solar plexus. It left no one indifferent, but was the world ready for it? Was Moscow, with its new shiny life, with its expensive restaurants and fashionable clubs, ready to hear this terrible truth from its not-so-distant past? The premiere was scheduled in a week, and Victor awaited it like a sentence. The premiere passed in a deathly silence. No cough was heard, no creaking of chairs. The auditorium, full of a bohemian and fashionable audience, turned into a single frozen organism. People, having come to an acute social play by a fashionable director, turned out to be unprepared for what they saw. They expected anything: political satire, shock value, dirt. But they did not expect such a deafening and freezing truth. When the curtain fell, the silence continued for a few more seconds, and then the hall exploded. It wasn't simple applause, it was hysteria. People jumped from their seats, shouted, "Bravo!" cried without being ashamed of their tears. They were not applauding the actors, they were applauding those who did not survive and the one who succeeded. The play became an event, a sensation. All the newspapers wrote about it, all the television channels spoke about it. Some called it a breakthrough, the most honest statement about the Stalinist era, others, a denigration and speculation on a complex theme. But indifferent people did not exist. Tickets to the theater were impossible to find. To one of the shows came a very old and hunched man. No one recognized him. It was Ivan Petrovich. He sat in the last row, and when the light went up in the hall, Victor saw tears flowing down his furrowed cheeks. After the show, he entered Victor's dressing room. "She would have been proud of you, son," he said. "You did everything right. You raised the best monument to her." But success also had a dark side. The play was noticed not only by critics and spectators, it was also noticed by them, the descendants, the heirs of those who were once the masters of life, people with known names, occupying high positions in business, in politics. They could not forgive this public reminder about the dirty secrets of their families. At first, there were phone calls. They called the theatre director, suggesting that the theme must be closed. Then, destroying articles began to appear in the press, written as carbon copies, accusing Victor of all deadly sins, of distorting history, of chasing cheap fame. Victor and the theatre director held their ground, but they understood that the forces were unequal. And then the worst began. They started to pressure the actors. The lead actor, who played the role of Comrade Master, was suddenly refused a role long promised in a big film project. Anna, the interpreter of the main role, had a lucrative advertising contract cancelled. These were signals, clear and unequivocal. One evening, when Anna was returning home after the show, two individuals stopped her in a dark alley. They didn't touch her. They simply stood in front of her, and one of them said, "You are a good actress, Anya, talented. It would be a pity if something happened to your pretty little face or your little legs. All sorts of things happen. Think about it. Maybe it's not worth playing in this show. There are many roles, but life is only one." They left. Anna ran to the theatre, pale, trembling. She told Victor everything. "I'm scared, Victor," she cried. "I'm scared. They won't stop." Victor hugged her. He felt his guilt. He had drawn her, all of them, into his personal war and didn't know how to protect them. That evening, he seriously thought about closing the show to save his people. But the next day, the actors gathered in his office. All of them, even those who were most afraid. "We won't leave," said an old actor in the name of everyone who played a small role in the play. "We will play. We are not them, Victor. We won't betray you, nor her memory. Now it is our war too." It was their choice, the choice of free people, and Victor understood that he had no right to back down. They decided to fight. Victor gave an extensive interview to an independent television channel. He spoke no names, but he told the story. He said that a real story lies at the basis of the play, the story of a woman he knew. He spoke about the fact that now pressure is being put on him and his actors. He did not accuse, he simply stated facts. The broadcast caused a huge wave. Society, which seemed already tired of revelations, suddenly woke up. The scandal began. Journalists started their own investigations. The names that Victor hadn't spoken began to surface on their own. The system, which for so long had kept its secrets, began to crack at all seams. The scandal expanded like a snowball. It went beyond the limits of the theatrical world and turned into the main social-political event of the country. Journalists dug up not only the story of the Demidov group, but also other similar stories that had been lying for decades in closed archives. It turned out that this was not an isolated pathology, but an entire system. A system of using human material, a system of total control and suppression, which functioned at all levels of power. The descendants of the gods found themselves in the center of the hurricane. Their respectable, glossy magazine images, which they had built with such care, were collapsing before everyone's eyes. Some of them tried to justify themselves, to threaten, to sue for slander. But it was as if they were trying to stop an avalanche. Public opinion was not on their side. Victor's play became the banner of this movement. It was impossible to enter the theatre. People stood in lines all night, Every performance ended with a spontaneous rally in front of the theater building. People came out shaken, crying, hugging the actors. They thanked them for the truth, for that bitter, terrible, but necessary vaccine against oblivion. The current power was in confusion. It didn't know how to react. On the one hand, the scandal hit the country's reputation. On the other hand, it was convenient for certain political clans who used it to drown their competitors. Finally, a Solomonic decision was made. To allow the case to proceed, but in a controlled manner, a special parliamentary commission was created to investigate the crimes of the Stalinist era. Victor was invited to speak at its session. He went up to the tribune. Before him sat deputies, officials, generals. Many of them were flesh of the flesh of that system about which he had staged the play. He made no pompous speeches, he simply told the story. He told Kira's history from beginning to end. He spoke quietly, simply, without pathos, and in this simplicity was a deafening force. When he finished, there was a deathly silence in the hall. This appearance became a turning point. The commission officially recognized the facts exposed in his speech. Some archives were opened. Dozens of women whose destinies were broken in the grinder of this system were rehabilitated posthumously. Their names were published. The country finally learned the names of its victims. For Victor, this was a victory. Bitter, suffered for, but a victory. He did what he had to do. He gave back to his teacher not only her true story but also her honest name. After this, he closed the show. "Why?" asked the actors, the journalists, the spectators. "It is so necessary now." "It is no longer necessary," Victor answered. "It has fulfilled its mission. It was a battering ram that broke the wall of silence. Now let the historians and politicians speak. Let the people themselves speak. Art shouldn't be a rally, it must be art. We told a private story, and now everyone must look into their own history, into the history of their family, their country, and make their own choice." He left Moscow. He went to that small town where Kira lived and died. He bought her old, half-dilapidated little house. He restored it. He put her grave in order. He no longer staged scandalous and loud plays. He opened a children's theater studio in that town, just as she had done once. He taught them not acting skills. He taught them to be free, to think, to feel, not to fear. He understood that the true victory over the dragon does not consist of cutting off its head. In its place, a new one will grow. The true victory consists of squeezing the slave out of yourself every day, drop by drop. Out of yourself, out of your children, out of your students. Kira's history did not end with a happy ending. In general, there was no ending in it. It became part of a large and common history, the history of a country that tries painfully, with blood, to escape its terrible past and still cannot. Another 10 years passed. The country changed again beyond recognition. Instead of noisy revelations and public debates came the era of gloss, consumption, and total oblivion. The new generation, raised on Hollywood movies and computer games, did not know and did not want to know about the tragedies of the past. The Stalinist era turned into a retro style, into a print on T-shirts. Portraits of the tyrant appeared again on car windshields. History turned into kitsch, into merchandise. Victor's play had long been forgotten. Only theater critics and a narrow circle of connoisseurs remembered his name. Victor himself settled permanently in the province. He had aged, turned grey, and had a wise and silent weariness in his eyes. His children's theatre studio became the meaning of his life. He did not chase fame, did not seek recognition. He simply did his small but important job. One day a new girl came to his studio, about 15 years old, incredibly talented, with burning eyes. She resembled the young Kira, as Victor had seen her in photographs, and her name was also Kira. She was the best in the group. She absorbed everything Victor said. She was obsessed with theatre, just as he had been once. Victor saw in her his continuation, the continuation of his teacher's cause. And so, when the studio was preparing for the final performance, this girl, young Kira, approached him. "Victor Sergeyevich," she said, "I want to play the main role." "It's a complicated role, Kira," he answered. "Are you sure you will handle it?" I will handle it, she said firmly. Because I understand this role, I know what it is about. And what is it about? Victor smiled. It is about the price. About the price of success, the girl answered, and her gaze was unspeakably serious for a child. You didn't choose this play by accident, did you? And you know that for everything in this life, one must pay. Sometimes the price is too high. Victor froze. He didn't know where she knew this from books, from intuition, or simply the new generation, despite its infantilism, understood everything about this life in the depth of its soul. After this discussion, he couldn't fall asleep for a long time. He thought that nothing changes, that there will always be the powerful of the world who will consider themselves entitled to dispose of others' destinies, and there will always be young and talented girls and boys who will stand before the choice between conscience and career, between honor and success. And he understood that his story, Kira's story, did not end. It is eternal. It will repeat again and again in different settings, with different names, but its essence will remain the same. On the day of the show, the hall was full. Young Kira played brilliantly. She wasn't playing tragedy, she was playing power. The power of the little person, who even being crushed, finds the courage within to remain human. In the final scene, when her heroine, passing through everything, refuses fame and leaves into nowhere, she wasn't crying. She was smiling, with a proud, sad, but victorious smile. Victor stood in the wings and watched her. And he didn't see his student, he saw her, his Kira, his teacher. It was as if she had returned in this young girl to tell her story again, to remind, to warn. After the show, one of the local officials, the head of the district administration, approached him. He was shaking Victor's hand, paying him compliments. Brilliant, Victor Sergeyevich. What talent the girl has. She must be taken to Moscow. We should show her to the right people. I can help. I have connections there. We'll arrange her in a good theater, make a star out of her. He was speaking, and Victor looked at him and, in his groomed and benevolent face, in his small, sharp and evaluating eyes, he saw them, the eternal, indestructible ones. He saw that assistant who once approached the 19-year-old Kira. He saw the comrade master. The dragon didn't die, it just changed its appearance. It changed from the Stalinist tunic into an expensive Italian suit. But its essence remained the same. Victor looked at young Kira, who stood nearby, flushed with success, happy. And he saw how in her eyes for a moment that fire of ambition which he knew so well flared up. The fire that burns everything. Thank you for the proposal, said Victor, slowly placing himself between the official and the girl, covering her with his body. But for now, we are not ready for Moscow. We will work here a bit more in the province. We still have a lot to learn. He took Kira by the shoulder and led her away from this man, from his promises, from his connections. He didn't know if he would be able to save her. He didn't know what choice she would make tomorrow, but he knew that today, now, he must be by her side. He must tell her everything he knows himself. He must pass on the memory of that other Kira, so that this new Kira would have a chance. A chance not to repeat her destiny, a chance to live her own honest life. His war continued and would never end. That night, Victor did not sleep. He sat in his small house, in that house where his teacher had once lived. He leafed through old photographs, programs of her plays for children. He thought about the cyclical nature of history, about the fact that everything repeats, and about his role in this infinite circuit. He understood that all his life he had fought with the ghosts of the past. First with the ghosts of his teacher, trying to unravel her secret. Then with the ghosts of the system itself, staging his play. And now, a new battle stood before him, the hardest one, the battle for the future, for the soul of a single concrete person, for young Kira. He understood that he wouldn't be able to keep her locked in the province. A talent of such magnitude had to find its way out. Sooner or later she would leave for Moscow, and there in the big seductive and cruel world she would again clash with the choice, and the old and wise teacher would no longer be beside her to protect her with his shoulder. What could he offer her? What armor to protect her from temptations, from compromises, from that pact with the devil that this world will propose to her at every step? He had only one answer, the truth. The next day he called Kira to his home. He made tea, took out an old yellowed album. "I want to tell you a story," he said. "The story of the woman in whose honor you were named. The story of a great actress whom you never saw on screen." And he told it. He told everything from beginning to end. He spared neither her young hearing nor his own heart. He told about Stalinist Moscow, about the Black Winters, about the government villas, about fame bought at the price of humiliation, about escape, about oblivion, about the silent and agonizing victory. The girl listened. Her face was serious, adult. She didn't cry, she simply listened, and in her eyes was reflected all the pain and all the weight of this story. When he finished, she remained silent for a long time. "Now I understand," she said finally. "I understand why you are here, and I understand what you are actually teaching us. Not theater. You are teaching us to be humans." "Yes," Victor nodded. "I try. And now you know, Kira. You know what the price can be, and when the choice appears before you, and it will necessarily appear, you will be armed with this knowledge. It is the only thing I can give you. The rest depends on you." A year later, Kira left for Moscow. She entered the best theater university on the first attempt. Her career was lightning fast. While still a student, she began to play in the theater, to film in cinema. She became a star, new, shining, blinding. Victor followed her successes from afar. He read interviews with her, watched movies with her participation. He saw how she steps on red carpets, how she receives prestigious awards, and he was afraid. He was afraid that the system would swallow her after all. But Kira was different. She was smart, cautious, independent. She did not participate in dubious parties, did not make useful acquaintances. She chose complicated, ambiguous roles. She worked with honest, talented directors. She was a professional to the marrow of her bones, and she was an absolutely closed person. No one knew anything about her personal life. One day, being already famous throughout the country, she came to her hometown, without warning. She came to Victor's studio. He was just rehearsing with a new group of children. She entered, sat in the last row of the auditorium, and simply watched. She watched how her old teacher, just as obsessed and just as lonely, teaches a new generation of children not to fear. After the rehearsal, she approached him. "Hello, Viktor Sergeyevich," she said. "Hello, Kira," he smiled. They stood and were silent. They didn't need words. They understood everything about each other. "I remember, Viktor Sergeyevich," she said quietly. "I remember everything, every day. Thank you." She hugged him, and in this hug was all her gratitude and all her victory. So, what did the dirtiest business in the history of the USSR actually hide? Not just sexual debauchery and abuse of power. It hid the mechanism of transforming a human into an object, the mechanism of destroying the soul. But Kira's story, both the first and the second, demonstrates that even in the darkest darkness, there is always room for light. For the light of human dignity, of talent, and of will. The question is only what choice each of us makes when the system proposes its bargain. Are we ready to pay for success with our soul? And what is actually more important, to be a star for a season or to remain a human for a lifetime? If this story touched you, please subscribe to our channel, give a like, and write in the comments what you think. Could Kira's story have ended differently in the modern world? And what choice would you have made in her place? Thank you for being with us. See you soon.